Hi, I'm Dave Schleiss coming to you live from Kscope 11, and I'm fortunate enough to have a little time here to talk with ACE Director and Oracle Guru, Dan Morgan. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing just great.
So, what brings you to Kscope?
Kscope.
That's this conference.
I know. I know what Kscope is. That's why I come here. I come here because Kscope is probably the best technical conference for tool developers in the United States. So I come here specifically just because this is where the presentations are, and this is where the other speakers are, this is where a lot of my friends are, and we get together and I both learn from the other speakers, but I also get to exchange information with people, ask questions, answer questions.
Well, that's great to hear. So, you come from an academic background. Do you think that gives you a little different perspective on this industry?
Well, my actual background in the industry comes from being on the production side. I moved into academia after a lot of years working in production, both development and DBA work. So I was actually working at the Boeing company on an Oracle project at the time that I was contacted, but I wasn't contacted by the university, I was actually contacted by Boeing. And they had been talking to the university and recommended that I go and look over starting up a new position at the university to teach Oracle. So I have always done both. I've always stayed in the production seat while simultaneously teaching. But it does definitely provide a different perspective, I think, from the standpoint that I've been doing things at a particular level, but also bringing into the fold people whose primary background was SQL Server, or Formix, or DB2, whose companies were moving to Oracle, or who were putting them into a dual role and saying, in addition to what you have been doing, this is the way forward, we need you to learn Oracle. So it gave me a lot of experience in understanding some of the issues that people confront as they're moving into the Oracle tool set, usually from a tool set that doesn't have nearly the breadth of capabilities. So you're talking to them about something where they're thinking, well, a database is really sort of like a spreadsheet with maybe some steroids stuffed in there. And you're going, no, let's talk a little bit, because that's not what a database really is. And this isn't a toy, and yeah, there's definitely a change in attitude towards it.
So, could you tell us something about Morgan's Library?
Morgan's Library started off as an accident. It started off as a website for my students, and it was hosted by the university on the university servers, and was used by my students, and it was essentially just the demos and examples that I wrote for the students that they could use as they were going home and doing homework or prepping for midterms and finals. And because the university doesn't have any private sites, it's all open to the public. The university woke up one time at some point and said, you know, we've got 1 million page requests a day on this website. And none of them are coming from students at the university. And by the way, most of them aren't even coming from inside the United States. We can't host this anymore. Would you please get it out of here? So
thanks, but
the
no
origin
thanks.
of Morgan, yeah, well, you know, it provided me with the environment where I could do things that were not specifically related to the class. So the library's expanded out to include other things, such as my travels to Oracle conferences, a blog, things of that type, which I couldn't have done within the university context. But I taught at the university for 10 years, so it was 10 years worth of examples. And over 10 years, you could write an awful lot of demo code, and it's just built from there.
That's great. Would you like to give the URL?
www.morganslibrary.org. MORGANS library.org.
All right. Do you have an opinion on object relational mapping technologies?
Yes, I do.
Could you share it with us?
Don't.
That
pretty much summarizes it. I have, on rare occasions, used object relational mapping, but I don't like to do it at the table level. I like to do it at the view level. So if you have Java developers who are insisting that they really would prefer to work with objects, then store the data relationally, get all the power that Oracle has in terms of data integrity from constraints, primary keys, foreign keys, then build an object relational view layer on top of that you then turn over to the developers for the front end.
So then you would use instead of triggers and things like that?
Yeah, you can set up instead of triggers in there, and so you've got the combination of, you've got triggers at the table level, you've got, if you are in 11.2 and you're looking at addition-based redefinition capabilities and you have the additioning views, you've got triggers that would really be at the level of the additioning views. Then you can do, instead of triggers at the object relational level, you've got more triggers than you probably should rationally be using.
Would you have any advice for a developer who's starting from day one, said, which way do I go, PLSQL or Java?
Or Java.
Or some other?
I wouldn't say that the choice is between PLSQL and Java to start with, because you're really addressing two entirely separate issues. If you're writing Java code, hopefully your Java code is sitting in the middle tier and is servicing a front-end application of some kind. Your PLSQL should be sitting at the back end. And I'd be using PLSQL to do the heavy lifting, to provide a security layer. I'd be using the PLSQL to stage data, perhaps, and to manage data integrity. I would never use Java code to manage data integrity. I would never use middleware to manage data integrity. So I think one has to have a pretty clear idea of where that separation is. I think for most developers who are just starting off, Java might be more appealing to them because Java is the front end. And you get to make forms, and you get to make checkboxes and buttons, and you get to put things out there and change colors. Changing colors is a huge thing when you're first learning. I know some of my very first applications where I had a button where I could change the form color.
HTML?
It was like, okay, this is better than Hello World, I'm going with it. Back-end coding tends to be a lot more of the kind of coding that, in my opinion, really matters, but it requires a much more serious mindset. I would put it this way, and not to denigrate doctors, but there's a difference in the level of attention to detail required between someone who's a neurosurgeon and someone that perhaps fixes broken toenails. They both may have MDs, and fixing the broken toenail may give you this instant gratification. Whereas with neurosurgery, you might see a 20% improvement in the person's quality of life over many years. But one of them is definitely a much more serious place to be.
Yes.
When you're inside the database, you're in a much more serious place. And the things that you do have far more reaching implications in terms of security, and in terms of stability, in terms of performance, and most importantly, in terms of data integrity.
Fascinating. Well, thanks for stopping by.